morning. I'm Toni Bowman, and this is the pre-class homework for the basic Introduction to Watercolor class for the Fine Arts Center of New River Valley. I am going to go over some basics that you need to know before you actually get to class. So it's how the paint will react to the paper. I have two cameras going, and I'm not very good working with cameras, so sometimes you're going to see me on one and sometimes you're going to see my hands on the other. Hopefully it won't be too confusing. I'm going to switch over to the other camera. You won't see me, but you'll see the stuff that we're going to be working with. Here we go. What we have here are essentials. You need paper towels or some form of blotting material. This is a Strathmore, fairly inexpensive watercolor paper, cold press paper. Cold press is usually best for beginners. There are differences in paper, and we'll get into that later. Then we have a Prang basic watercolor set with 8 colors. That and a brush that comes with it. It's a synthetic brush that'll get you started without too much of a investment. Watercolor can be an expensive hobby. We have a spray bottle. I'm using an old Windex bottle, and you need a container for water so that you can clean your brush. You may have to change this water frequently so that it stays clean. An essential part of watercolor is to have clean water, clean paint. If you have muddy paint-filled water, when you put it, your color to it, it's going to add that muddy paint that's floating in that water to your color, and you're going to have dull paintings. Okay. There are 3 different kinds of watercolor paints. This is considered a pan paint. It's because it comes in a pan and it's ready to go. This is introductory quality, but they have pan paints in professional quality. There's also tube paints that squirt out like oil paints, but they're for watercolor. There are people who are professionals who prefer tube paints, and they only use them fresh out of the tube, so they're all squishy and juicy. If you're like me, you use tube paints because I like them, and I can squirt out just as much as I want, so it saves me some money, I think. I'm not sure of that. I may be deluding myself. But it's not really a whole lot different than the pan paints, because once I'm done with a painting, the tube paints dry, and I spray them to re-wet them. So it starts out wet and juicy, but it winds up being pan paint. I just think it's cheaper. It's my preference, and this is something that everybody has a preference for. Liquid watercolors are really, really intense, and they're like water, so they have some limited use. Paper comes in different quality. Watercolor paper is not paper wood pulp. It is 100% rag cotton. And it has an absorbent quality. It comes in cold press, hot press, which is a very smooth surface, and also a rough surface. Watercolor paintings are affected by the quality of the paint and the quality of the paper. I want to show you first what the paint does. Notes around. All right, I'm going to move this. Okay, I want you to mark your paper with a Sharpie. In your watercolor palette, you have black, brown, purple, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. And you're going to mark a grid with your Sharpie, with your colors. In the first line, where you're just going to have pure color, you're not going to mix it with anything, you're going to make a diagonal Sharpie that's fairly wide. There is a difference between watercolor paints. Some of them are opaque and some of them are transparent. The opaque paints have a tendency to make mud if you mix them too much. So you want to know which ones are opaque, and one of the best ways to do that is to see if you can see the Sharpie line through it. Over here, we're going to see some techniques. So we're going to what they call dry brush wash across. Over here, we're going to use a really juicy method, and we're going to mix the colors. Here it's going to be a wash, and we are going to then let it dry. And it's called a glazing technique. And then we're going to do it again with another color. You have to be careful not to pick the color up underneath because it all melts in water, but you can get different colors by building up layers. Over here, we're going to mix the colors on the paper wet. Now you can mix colors on your palette, but you can also mix them on the paper. And here, we're going to put water down and then float the color in. Okay, so let's get started. Get your brush, get it good and wet, and we're going to start with the black. We're going to juicy up our paintbrush. Okay, and you're going to take this black. I'm going to need more water, more paint, and you're going to brush it all the way across. Now, you don't want to scrub your brush, okay? You can see what I'm doing. We're going to take that black. I keep going back for water. Do you see that? And we're going to go all the way across. Now, and it doesn't matter if you cross the lines. If you'll notice, if I have more water, it's more of a gray color. If I have less water, more pigment, it's a solid black. Most watercolor artists do not have black on their palette. They mix black so that it is more of a vibrant hue. Black kind of gets dull when you use it like this. All right, so there we go. We've got black. Now, wash your brush really good. You got a paper towel here. And we don't want the brown mixing with the black, so we're going to give that black a chance to dry. Rinse that brush, and we're going to come down here and do the purple, because it will mix on the paper. Oh, shucks. I went across my wet and wet. We'll fix that. All right. And this time I'm just scrubbing along. Brush strokes long, brush strokes short. You see the difference when the brush is drier. So here's a wet brush. And when I've got more pigment than water, it has a different texture to it. And this time I'm going to stop. Okay. Now I'm going to clean my brush really good. And I'm going to put water down right here. See how there's a little bit of pigment left there? Now, you want this water to be shiny, not necessarily puddled. So I'm going to squeeze the water out of my brush, come back, and suck some of it up. Squeeze it out. I'll show you again. Let's see. See? You could also blot it with a paper towel. But now, what I'm going to do is just see how it just flows where the water is. Okay? And I'm going to leave that sit and see what it does. Now, this one, let's do a really juicy wet. Now when I get over here close, it should just roll right into the water because it's so close. See the difference in the quality of the colors. Now again, we don't want to blend, so we're going to go for green. So green, more water. So with your dry brush, you don't go very far. The more pigment compared to water, the darker your color. Up. All right, there's my wet. Shake out that green. Put my water down. See how my water's getting dirty. I'm going to have to change it. Okay. So I'm going to charge in there. I'm going to get the water off my brush. So I rinsed it off, but now I've got color. Now, if you'll notice where I was working wet into wet, some of that is still wet. The color is still rolling around. So we're going to start over here on this side. Hopefully by the time we get over there, it'll be dry. I'm going to move things around so it's easier for me to work. And I don't know if you noticed or not, when we started, we had a white brush, which the color has now stained to several different colors. Okay, this is your mixing area, in case you were mixing colors on the palette. So you can mix colors on the tablet, the paper, which we're going to do right now, or you can mix colors here on the palette to get the color you like before you come over here. So I'm going to angle this a little bit. I'm right-handed. And our first one's going to be black. And so that's going to be a pretty boring output because black is going to cover everything up and it's all going to be black. But what you're going to see is that second coat of black made the black even darker. Put a little more water on there. So what we have is black. And this is why a lot of artists don't use black on their palette, because it's just so overpowering and it can also be very dull. Okay, now we're going to use the whole skip a row to keep the colors from blending, and I'm going to go clean my water after all that black. Oh, but we're going to skip a row so we don't blend purple. Okay. And can you all see the difference in the texture here on the palette since I've had a lot of water on there? Okay. Purple. Now I'm dragging pigment because I had quite a bit on my brush. There we go. So the purple's deeper. You have a purple blue. It kind of took the green right away. Let's try green. This is a very dull green. Now, I don't know if you can see, but if I spend too much time brushing, I carry the other colors. See how this is now kind of a dark color? Because I picked up pigment as I went and it changed everything. See how the red is now blending? So you have to be fairly fast. Orange. See, I'm dragging pigment again. So we're going to have to be faster. Can't go back and forth. All right. First we have the completed grid with the praying paints. Then I'm going to show you my palette with the tube colors, 140-pound cold pressed paper, and the grid that I painted with my colors. I have some paintings here. I look forward to working with you on 9th of February, the second Saturday.